Hey horror fans, welcome back to Room 237, coming at you with another recent horror film that I came across on Hulu. And it's a film that I had seen before, back when it came out 8 years ago. Highly acclaimed film. And I remember not being a fan of it at all. I mean, I like certain aspects, but above all, I was not a fan of this film. And if I remember correctly, back then it was one of those horror movies you weren't allowed to say I don't like it. You know, sort of like the Midsummer or Hereditary of back then. Like the horror comedy version of that. Upon watching it again, I can say I enjoy it more. I certainly appreciate the satire behind it more. But I don't know if I'd still call myself a fan of it. That is 2012's The Cabin in the Woods. Now, when this first, I do kind of remember trailers for it. Definitely remember the poster for it. And I thought it was going to be either like a slasher film or an Evil Dead type film. But obviously a parody. You know, the trailer, how the cabin's like a Rubik's Cube. Obviously, there's someone pulling the strings, making shit happen. And as the film went on, when I first saw it, I was like, okay, so it's more like a Behind the Mask, Rise of Leslie Vernon type film, where, okay, they're taking all the familiar conventions of a horror film that definitely the fans know, and they're playing with that, and the greater satire, I guess, is more towards us, the audiences. Because basically what it is you have apparently every culture in the world at one point of the year, they all do their, I guess, because it shows what like Japan is doing. It shows a bunch of Japanese girls in a classroom with a ghost. It sort of shows, I guess, the stereotypical kind of horror movie that would be going on. So like for us in the States, it's a cabin in the woods. And there is this big company behind the scenes with, you know, guys with ties behind computer switches making shit happen. You know, like of course they have what they call the Harbinger, which is like the backwoods guy at the gas station who is the, you know, you're all doomed kind of prophet. He's part of their thing. They're driving up the mountain to the cabin. There's like a tunnel. We see a CGI bird fly. And there's all like the hexagon kind of force field that like shocks and kills the bird. And, you know, we hear that, okay, the beer has been replaced with this sort of libido-enhancing chemical, you know, because some of the characters have to have sex. We have, you know, the athlete, the scholar, the whore, the fool or the stoner, and the virgin. We have our 5 people. And I thought it was going to be more like a slasher film or like Evil Dead, but eventually they go down to the cellar. You know, they're playing Truth or Dare, and the cellar door flings open. There's a switch that they do. They go down to the cellar, and there's all these creepy artifacts that you would see in any kind of horror film. And like someone picks up this diary from some turn-of-the-century religious family about how the dad, the religious fanatic, tortured the family. Which I always thought it was this ball that you move parts and manipulate and like hit switches, and that's what chooses the monster that comes out. But they also made it seem like it's like a mixture of that, but also, because what happens is, yes, that, and they call it zombie redneck torture family, because each department, like maintenance, internal whatevers, lighting, accounting, they all bet on what monster's gonna come out. Because that's another thing. They really make the people behind the scenes look like the fans or the audience. But they, even on a greater level, well, I'll get to that. And even though there's like another category that says zombies, the two main guys behind the scenes pulling the strings is a Richard Jenkins, the dad on Step Brothers, who I love seeing in movies. I think he's great. And Bradley Whitford. I know him as one of the doctors from Awakenings. Most people will know him as the villain from, forgive the Adam Sandler reference, but Billy Madison. I mean, those guys are fun to watch. That's where most of the comedy comes from. Aside from, I guess, the Stoner, which the Stoner is very funny. Stoner was actually played by, I'll get the, Fran Kranz, if I pronounce that right. And, and Chris Hemsworth plays as the athlete. And this was produced by Joss Whedon. It was directed by Drew Goddard, which Drew Goddard created the Daredevil for Netflix. And, of course, Joss Whedon has done tons of stuff for Marvel. I haven't really watched the Marvel films, but I know Whedon is like a huge name for Marvel. And it was written by both of them. So Chris Hemsworth is the jock. But that's where like a lot of the comedy comes from, is the guys behind the scenes, and I guess the Stoner. Which the Stoner is very funny. I have to give credit there. Normally I find the Stoners annoying, but they actually give some of the best lines to the Stoner. Like whenever something bad, like he starts conspiring what's going on. It's like, we're all puppets. There's puppeteers. Nothing's right. Then he realizes what he's saying is crazy. And he's like, I'm gonna go read a book with pictures. He just walks off. So yeah, these redneck zombie torture family zombies come out. And then we get the horror scenes. Like the jock and the whore gets killed. Which they even walk out to part of the forest where they get in this soft area where they can release pheromone mist to get them all horny so they can have sex. So it's like every possible angle is in some way manipulated by these people. And I thought that was really smart. It kind of shows, it's kind of like how on Behind the Mask, Leslie Vernon shows how, you know, he's rigged the windows so no one can escape. He's sabotaged all the weapons, like the sledgehammer, the axe, the pickaxe, the pitchfork. So with one swing, the head would fall off. He's slashed their tires. You know, pretty much how he makes it so no one can escape in like a slasher film. And then, of course, the film goes even deeper than that because they decide to leave, and then this is where it gets kind of interesting because they get in the RV and they're about to leave, and they realize they haven't caved in the tunnel yet, so they're all racing to cave in the tunnel so that they're stuck. They're like, oh, okay, so that's kind of like the bridge being all like that on of Evil Dead. And I remember when I first saw this, I was really with it. But, no, by like the second half, it almost becomes a completely different film. This time around, it was a little bit more fun to see because every time someone dies, they pull a lever and this blood goes down this thing And it goes like this crack that looks like some ancient prophetic carving in the wall that the blood fills in with like an outline of a person who represents that character, the whore, the athlete, scholar, virgin, fool. Well, we think the stoner dies, so they pulled the lever, and that's when things start getting kind of screwed up. Because there's like an earthquake and rumbling down below. And people keep talking about, upstairs, downstairs. Like we're getting news from upstairs, and people downstairs are pissed off. Eventually, we see that the kids in Japan defeated their ghost, so that's a fail. All these other places have failed. So now it's up to America to appease the ancient ones. So the stoner and the lead girl, where have I seen the lead girl from? Kristen Connolly. I know I've seen her in other things. A Good Marriage, but I saw that a while ago. I wouldn't have remembered her from that. Was it on TV? No. She's been on TV, but nothing I've seen. Okay, well, no, she was in The Happening, but I haven't seen that piece of shit since it first came out. What the hell am I thinking of then? I don't know. But she looks quite familiar. I just can't place where I've seen her. And so they get down to like this. There's like a shaft in the ground. They get down. There's an elevator. And they end up in like this glass, like, they keep coming up next to these different monsters behind glass, like a werewolf, a ghost, this little ballerina girl with like rows and rows of teeth. One guy who's obviously a play on a Cenobite because he's got like the black leather look. He's holding the sphere that they had, but he's got a bunch of saw blades in his head and like big dilated eyes. And that's when they realize they've chosen the way that they're going to be killed. Then the camera zooms out and we see that, okay, so they're in like the cell of the redneck zombie family, and all these monsters that like have ever been created are down in like this holding chamber where they all have their own cells. Whenever they're picked, their elevator goes up and gets released. And if you look closely, I mean, there's some like a giant spider or Lovecraftian monsters, but there's like a clown. You see this one that has like two twin girls holding hands, so that's obviously The Shining. You could probably be there all day on pause pointing them all out. Probably the most entertaining part of the film. And of course, the stoner and the virgin fight back. The people know that they're in the facility, so they're like, okay, the virgin cannot die first, kill him. They pretty much say the other four are mandatory. The virgin's death is optional, depending on fate. But they let all the monsters go, and that's the bloodiest part of the film. All these different monsters killing everyone. And when you see the main hallway where all the elevators are, it's just blood and guts everywhere. A bunch of zombies everywhere. And then like the whole revelation of the film is they're down below where all those blood, like where the blood goes with the outlines in the wall. And they're greeted by probably one of the biggest... It would have been cool if it was Jamie Lee Curtis. But this actress does kind of have that authoritative presence to her. Sigourney Weaver. Which was also a great choice. But for some... Did they ever consider... Yeah, it doesn't really say anything about uh, getting Jamie Lee Curtis. Maybe they always wanted a Sigourney Weaver. But, Sigourney Weaver describes, down below are the ancient ones who used to rule the world. And every culture has their own ritualistic sacrifice every year. Whereas ours is there's the group of 5 kinds of people. And they made it so that it's like it used to happen more arbitrarily. Now, just because the demand is so serious, I'm guessing that's why it's more systematic. And pretty much things are so hectic now because the stoner's alive and everything's gone off the rails. Like, she tries to talk the virgin, Kristen Connolly, into killing the stoner. Which, it doesn't work out. Sigourney Weaver gets killed. And then they just kind of sit there and smoke a joint talking about, like, giant gods. Because now it's the end of the world. Pretty much, these gods have to be appeased by the deaths of these people. And it does end with where they are crumbling. And we see outside where the cabin is, and this giant, like, black lava-looking hand comes out of the ground and, like, smacks the camera. And Whedon and Goddard have said that this is a critique because they love horror films. They love the horror genre. But they feel that horror has gone too close to the torture porn genre, and it's no longer fun. Like, you have people acting like idiots, which has always happened. I mean, Friday the 13th built a series on characters being stupid. But yeah, they felt, because at this time, I mean, this was while, like, Paranormal Activity was getting really big, which I saw is on Hulu. I don't really want to watch it because I hated the first 2. I didn't really hate the first one, but I hate that fucking series. People have been asking me if I'm going to see it, and I don't think I am. But, yeah, they think it's become more of, like, a quest for quenching the lust of just seeing bloodshed. And at least for the torture porn, that's where they felt horror was going. I guess I can see that, but I really, really like the concept of this horror movie taking place in a cabin in the woods with our stereotypical group of 5 characters, with everything within the cabin being controlled by this secret organization. It's like every cabin in the woods horror movie we've ever seen, which is why I love the title, The Cabin in the Woods. It's like every other movie in the 80s. I love that concept, but then it's like once you get to that second half and they start getting into the facility and you find it's like every monster ever made, I like that idea too, but I almost feel like that could be in a different movie. Like, Bradley Whitford's character's bummed that a merman monster never gets picked, and he really wants to see it. And that's who he gets killed by. And even Richard Jenkins was like, have you ever seen the cleanup on those things? It's awful. Because when the merman eats him, his blowhole blows out all the blood. Which is kind of funny. I guess that could have worked. But at the same time, I feel like the whole giant gods, the ancient ones, being pissed about it and taking over the world I feel like, did I see it coming? No. I really didn't. The first time I saw it, I did not think the film was going to go that far left field. And I think that's why I hated it when I first saw it. I I can no longer say I hate Cabin in the Woods. I definitely see the comedy side now, which I saw it back then too. I guess I just didn't appreciate it. Of course, I have seen hundreds of horror films since then. Hundreds from the 80s since then. So, and I get what they're satirizing, the kinds of films, the audiences. I do get all that. I still think it feels like two or three different films put together. Like, I guess I could say it doesn't flow together as fluently to make it all work, because each new idea feels drastically different and almost like it doesn't fit. But I can only say I appreciate Cabin in the Woods more so now than I used to. And that's pretty much the best I can say about it. I mean, there's a lot of CGI that I don't care for. Was this released by Blumhouse? I don't think it was. No, Joss Whedon. Duh. But I mean, the performances are fine. The comedy works. You know, even if it's not satirical comedy, even if it's just straightforward comedy, I think it works. It is funny. The deaths are either fun or well done. Like, well, I never really found it scary, but when they're supposed to be scary, they're well done. You know, I like how the stoner, who's usually one of the first ones to go, which, you know, as we thought, he was like the second one to go, but he actually survived and ends up being one of the survivors. You know, that was different. So, yeah, I don't know if I would go as far as saying I now like the film, but I certainly appreciate it a lot more. I'm still not 100% with the ending, but it is what it is. And I know, I mean, this movie only made like $66.5 million on a $30 million budget. So it technically made money, but it wasn't like Sinister, which made a ton of money. Actually, even that didn't make a ton of money. It still made less than 100 million, but... And actually, funny enough, the makeup effects that are not CGI were done by David Leroy Anderson and his wife. And his wife is Heather Langenkamp, the original Nancy Thompson herself, from the original, the third, and the 7th Elm Street. So that's pretty cool. But yeah, Cabin in the Woods. Again, won't go as far as saying I'm a fan of the film, but I definitely appreciate it a lot more than I did. Definitely don't hate it now. But anyway, that is Cabin. I thought for sure this was going to be a big rant, and I'm honestly surprised it's not. But yeah, thank you for watching.